I inherited a haunted cabin in the Rockies from my uncle, the terrifying rules he left behind. I never should have opened that door. My fingers trembled as they gripped the cold, rusty handle. It felt like a warning. But I pushed it open anyway, curiosity gnawing at my insides. What lay beyond was dark, so dark it swallowed the feeble light of my flashlight. My routine had been normal, just me and my mundane life in the city. Waking up to alarms, sipping coffee, sitting in dull office meetings. Yet here I was, standing at the threshold of my late uncle's cabin, a place whispered about in my family for years. They said he had an unusual knack for collecting oddities. Bones of animals, jars filled with murky liquids, things you'd only find in the deepest depths of nightmares. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of mildew and something else I couldn't place, like the very essence of fear. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, twisting and shifting as if they were alive. My heart raced. A cold draft swept over me, sending chills cascading down my spine. I could swear I heard whispers, too, faint yet tantalizing, as if the walls themselves were sharing dark secrets. As I stepped further inside, I felt a prickling sensation of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder. The door had swung shut behind me with a soft yet deliberate thud. Blankets of silence wrapped around me, broken only by the creaking floorboards beneath my feet. A picture hung crooked on the wall, its subject an unsettling smile that seemed to leer at me. I ventured deeper, compelled by some unseen force. I could hear scratching, a frantic sound, like fingernails against wood. The walls seemed to close in, the room growing darker. My breath quickened. Was that a movement from the corner of my eye? I turned sharply, bracing myself. Nothing. Just the suffocating stillness. I reached for a dusty jar on the shelf. It felt cold, alive. My fingertips brushed over strange symbols etched into its surface. They tingled, almost pulsing under my touch. My skin crawled. I dropped the jar, a loud crack followed, and 1,000 shards glimmered on the floor like teeth. A deep rumble rolled through the cabin as if it were growling in anger, rattling the very bones of the building. A gust of wind flared, flickering the candles lined up like soldiers on the mantel. Their flames danced wildly, casting eerie shadows that swayed and twisted across the walls. They whispered in a language I couldn't comprehend, pulling me toward a door at the back of the cabin. I felt drawn to it, an ache in my chest, but dread clung to me like a second skin. I took a step toward it, heart pounding. Each thud echoed in my ears like thunder. The door loomed closer, shimmering like a mirage. Would I find answers, or something worse? Suddenly, I heard it again, the scratching. It was louder now, more urgent. Panic ignited inside me, and I stumbled backward, bumping into a table. An array of objects toppled, crashing against the floor with a symphony of disaster, and then, a horrible sound erupted from behind me, a deep, guttural growl. I froze, terror gripping my throat. I didn't want to turn around, but something compelled me. Something monstrous awaited. I took a breath, forcing myself to look. But all there was darkness closing in, and a shadow, a figure looming behind me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I wanted to back away slowly, to escape the suffocating dread that filled the air, but my body betrayed me, rooted to the spot. The figure behind me was amorphous, a swirl of darkness with edges that flickered in and out of existence, like smoke caught in a breeze. A wave of nausea washed over me as I felt the weight of despair seep into my very bones. Who are you? I managed to croak, my voice barely a whisper against the oppressive silence. It responded not with words, but with a frantic scratching sound, echoing louder now, clawing at the walls of my sanity. I stumbled forward, but something cold and wet clamped down around my ankle, a fetid grip that yanked me back against the floor, dragging me closer to the shadow. Panic surged as I kicked and thrashed, but the more I struggled, the tighter that invisible grip became, sinking into my skin like a parasite latching onto its host. The shadows swirled closer, the darkness swirling like a living thing, vibrating with an unsettling energy that made my skin prickle. I could almost feel its hunger, like an ancient beast awakening from a long slumber. In a split-second decision, I turned and bolted toward the door at the back of the cabin. The whispers grew louder, urging me on, promising me freedom. I grasped the handle, praying it would turn, but it felt fused in its frame, resisting my desperate attempt. My breath quickened as I cursed my own terror. "Let me out!" I cried, feeling the intense pull of despair. But even my voice sounded muted, swallowed by the curse that clung to the cabin like a thick fog. The figure inched closer, and I could finally make out two glistening coals for eyes, set within a writhing mass of shadow. They radiated malice, the very essence of despair reflected back at me. "Please, I just want to leave," I screeched, but the darkness around me pulsed with laughter, a sinister echo that rattled the very foundation of the cabin. Then, in a sickening twist, I felt fingers cold, clammy fingers slither around my throat. They tightened, constricting like a vice, choking out my words, my ability to breathe. In that moment of sheer terror, I remembered my uncle's rules, the ones I had shunned as nonsense. Don't answer the door. Don't disturb the quiet. Don't let it inside. I had broken every one of them, and now the consequences came rushing back. The whispers intensified, and the shadows seemed to ripple around me, mocking my plight. Suddenly, I heard a louder sound, a crash reverberated through the cabin. The walls quivered, and splintering wood echoed ominously. The figure paused, momentarily distracted. My instincts kicked in again, and I pushed against the door with all my might. It didn't budge, so I turned to the nearest window, pressed my hands against the glass, and felt cold air seep through the cracks. Clambering toward it, I frantically glanced back at the figure, now swirling ominously in place. With a final surge of desperation, I hurled myself against the window, feeling the glass give way beneath the force of my weight. It shattered like the fragile barrier it was, sending shards cascading into the night, but as I crawled desperately through the jagged opening, I realized it was too late. The figure surged forward, clenching the air around me with an insatiable hunger. I landed on the cold, shadowy ground outside, disoriented, just in time to witness a sight that would haunt me forever. The woods surrounding the cabin were alive, undulating with darkness like an infected wound. Wisps of shadow coiled up from the ground, merging into the figure behind me, which now stood at the threshold, watching me with those burning, malevolent eyes. As the last glimmer of evening light surrendered to the encroaching night, the whispers reached a deafening crescendo, chanting a name I recognized all too well, the name of my uncle, and then, the ground beneath me trembled, erupting in a cacophony of grating whispers. The trees began to sway violently, branches clawing out at me as if alive, pulling me back toward the doom I had narrowly escaped. The shadows expanded, enveloping the cabin, and for the first time, I felt an overwhelming realization shatter through my fear. My uncle hadn't left this place. He was still here, bound to the horrors he had unleashed. Before I could react, the shadows seized me again, something cold enveloped my mind, dragging me closer to the abyss, and in that moment of despair, I felt it in my gut, a horrifying certainty that whatever haunted my uncle had now found a new target. The final whispers echoed clear and resonant in the silence, intensifying with excruciating clarity, "Welcome home." And as I tore away from the darkness, an icy hand clamped down over my mouth, stifling my screams as the shadows began to pull me back toward the cabin. I could feel their hunger, insatiable, relentless, promising that I too would become a part of their twisted legacy. I was not alone in this horror. What had I brought upon myself? What had I awakened? And then, without warning, I felt something sharp beneath a blade penetrating through the darkness around me, and all I could think in that fleeting moment before it all went black was, did I truly inherit my uncle's cabin, or had I inherited his curse? I awoke to the suffocating dark once more, but this time, it was different. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay, yet warmer, almost as if I was being cradled by the shadows themselves. I strained to open my eyes, squinting through the blackness, instinctively yearning for the familiarity of daylight. But the night held on, resilient and impenetrable. Disoriented, I forced myself to rise, pushing against the ground, cool and clammy beneath my fingers. Where was I? The memory of the cabin and its malevolent grip flooded back with terrifying clarity, and I bolted upright, panic surging anew. I remembered the shadows, the whispers, the cold hands pulling me back. "Uncle!" I called into the void, voice trembling with apprehension, echoes swallowed by the never-ending dark. Silence answered me, thick enough to smother a scream. Heart hammering, I began to shuffle, my feet whispering against a surface that felt all too familiar. As I explored my surroundings, I felt traces of the power that had once filled the cabin, yet this was more like a tomba space suspended between existence and the unnameable horrors that lurked just beyond the veil. The sensation of being watched crept down my spine like icy fingers, tightening until I could hardly breathe. Moving cautiously, I stumbled upon what appeared to be shapes in the distance. I squinted, praying for clarity, and instead found a gallery of nightmarish silhouettes. It was as if the shadows had formed a grotesque tapestry of my uncle's sins, flickering amidst the dimness a long-forgotten family gathered together, trapped in a moment of horror. Their faces twisted in anguish and terror, eyes wide, mouths agape as if forever screaming a warning I couldn't quite grasp. The whispers returned, rising from the depths of the gloom, slithering through the air like serpents. "Join us," they hissed, voices layering over one another, hauntingly familiar yet warped. "You must take your place." I staggered back, horrified, as their pleading faces bore down on me. A sharp realization pierced my mind: these weren't just shadows, they were echoes of my family's own despair, tethered to this forsaken place. Each face held a unique agony, a story mingled with fate, and I narrowed my eyes, straining to catch a glimpse of my uncle among them. Suddenly, one figure stepped forward, cloaked in darkness yet undeniably human. His features sharpened into focus, my uncle's face twisted in anguish, eyes rimmed with terror as he reached out toward me, fingers elongated and trembling. "Help us!" he rasped, voice breaking through the chaos. "You must escape. You cannot stay here." Before he could finish, a roar echoed through the void, shaking the very ground beneath me. It vibrated with an ancient rage, reverberating through the shadows as they recoiled. The silhouettes vanished into the dark, swallowed up by an unseen beast, their mournful wails echoing faintly in my ears. My uncle's form lingered a moment longer, eyes pleading, desperate, then he too was lost to the abyss that I stumbled backward, dread consuming me as the ground began to shift, writhing like a living thing. I could sense it now, a presence hungrily edging closer, pulling away the fabric of the darkness around me, revealing twisted roots and brambles that rose like jagged teeth from the earth. "Get out!" a voice shrieked from somewhere deep in the void. "Don't come back." With my heart pounding against my ribs, I turned to flee but felt an all-consuming force tugging at my soul. The whispers swelled, an anguished cacophony crashing down upon me, suffocating my every thought. "It's too late for you. The curse is yours." A flash of light flickered in the distance, a beacon cutting through the oppressive darkness. I clawed my way toward it, adrenaline fueling my desperate escape. But then the ground buckled beneath me, and icy tendrils shot up from the earth, latching onto my ankles, pulling me back into the waiting maw of despair. "Did I in a last-ditch effort?" I screamed. "No. I refuse." I fought against the darkness, summoning the memories of my uncle and the tales I had dismissed so easily, of the sacrifices made to keep the monster at bay. But as shadows clawed at my skin, I felt its presence drawing ever closer, hungry and insatiable, and just before the darkness embraced me once more, a bone-chilling whisper slithered into my ear: "You will never leave." The coldness seeped deeper, and a blinding pain erupted within me, a sacrifice not just for my own soul, but for the countless others woven into this nightmare. As the light began to dim, fading into nothingness, I realized with terror that the true horror wasn't my uncle's past, it was my future. I was becoming a whisper among the shadows, destined to roam these accursed woods for all eternity. But then, just before consciousness faded entirely, I heard the most dreadful sound of a little girl's laughter, echoing through the darkness, sweet and sinister. "You can't escape, Auntie." And then, I was alone once more. Every fiber of my being struggled against the grasp of darkness as I awoke again, limbs heavy with an unfamiliar weight. My breath came shallow and stuttered, a melody of panic threading through the silence. I lay on the cold ground, the dampness chilling me to the bone, but before I could gather my senses, the laughter pierced through the oppressive stillness once more, a haunting echo that spiraled in my mind. "Where are you?" I gasped, my voice cracking into the void. The last vestiges of the girl's laughter still reverberated, wrapping around me like ivy on a gravestone, mocking the fragility of my sanity. Rising to my feet, I was greeted not by the cabin but by a twisting maze of gnarled trees, their limbs stretching out like skeletal fingers grasping toward the heavens. The air felt electric, charged with a foreboding energy that buzzed beneath my skin. I was trapped within this monstrous forest, the shadows latent between the tangled roots whispering secrets beyond my comprehension. Instinct drove me to move. I forced my legs to carry me forward, heart racing as I navigated through the suffocating haze. Whispers crescendoed around me, circling like a tempest. Stay play. I felt the pulse of their longing entwined with my own fear, weaving a tapestry of despair that threatened to constrict my throat. As I stumbled through the underbrush, the fading light of the day grew dimmer still, swallowed whole by an interminable night. Each breath I took turned heavy in my lungs as though the very trees bore witness to my plight. I began to hear more than just laughter, echoes of cries and despair layered beneath the surface, an orchestra of ghosts seeking solace. "Help us!" a voice emerged from the depths, soft, almost childlike, with a touch of something sinister. I hesitated, fear clawing at my insides. Was it her? The little girl? Or another trap laid by the insidious shadows hungry for a new resident? "Help us!" the voices melded together, voices of desperation merging with the little girl's sing-song call. For a moment, curiosity pushed aside my trepidation. I had to know. Moving cautiously, I followed the sound deeper into the woods where the trees loomed taller and darker, an impenetrable fortress of despair. Their trunks writhed with ethereal vines, twisting and coiling like living creatures poised to strike. I felt the ground pulse underfoot, a heartbeat, quickening with my every step. Suddenly, the air shifted. An awful crack echoed overhead as branches thundered against each other, creating a cacophony that sent a rush of adrenaline through me. I stumbled backward, breath hitching, and caught sight of a figure emerging from the shadows. She was small, dressed in a pale dress that fluttered unnaturally despite the lack of wind. Her hair draped around her like a veil of night. The girl was there, her eyes glinting like shards of glass, both innocent and monstrous. "Come and play with us forever," she sang, voice sweet yet twisted, with an undercurrent of malice that tore at the edges of my composure. From behind her, shapes began to materialize, more figures, children caught in their own playtime, with visages painted in despair. They beckoned, hands outstretched, smiles painted on lips that never ceased to whisper. "We need you. Don't you want to stay?" Horrified, I felt the crescendo of dread build within me. This was no innocent game. I recognized the souls of the lost within their gleeful facades. "No. I must leave," I shouted, but the words slipped into the air, dissipating amid their mocking laughter. The little girl stepped closer, her breath tracing the space between us like chilling fog. "But you can't leave, not now that you know our names." There was an undeniable power woven into her statement, the resonance rattling my bones as if she were pulling strings I could not see. I stumbled back, recognition dawning, feeling the weight of the names crashing into me, the legacy imbued in this cursed woodland. And there, swirling in my mind, I recalled the tales my uncle had woven about the toys left behind by past residents, generations of children who had vanished into these woods. Each of them atoned for the freedom they once sought, leaving remnants of their frivolities scattered like breadcrumbs. "Join us," the children chorused, their voices blending into one horrific song, spilling out the fragments of despair tied to their existence. "No!" I cried, feeling the shadows warp around me, their fingers curling around my ankles. I surged forward, yearning to escape the hold of their collective anguish. But as I turned to flee, the ground trembled violently, shuddering with perverse life. A shadow lunged forward, the embodiment of despair seizing me, a slithering mass with grotesque features, pulsating in rhythm with the fear coursing through me. I was racked by cold hands, clawing at my mind, pulling me deeper into the void. You belong to us now. The little girl's laughter rang out, bouncing wildly off the trees, a stark reminder of the truth I could no longer deny. I thrashed against the force pulling me down, caught in the web of darkness that claimed me. Just as my vision blurred and my screams melded with the shadows, I caught a glimpse of something sprawled on the forest floor, a cracked doll, its eyes glinting with the same malevolence I now found mirrored in the plea of the girl, and then everything went dark, the last remnant of light snuffed out like a candle in a tempest. The last thing I heard was her voice, sweet and sinister, promising an eternity of play. Welcome home, Auntie. The sensation of weightlessness enveloped me as I slipped away, darkness consuming every flickering perception. Time ceased to exist, marked only by the rhythmic echo of a heartbeat, my heartbeat slowing until it felt like a distant whisper. When I awoke again, I found myself lying in a clearing bathed in pale moonlight, the silvery beams illuminating twisted faces of otherworldly trees. I pushed myself upright, a shudder racing through me as fragmented memories of the shadows and the girl clouded my thoughts. Cold sweat dripped down my spine, pooling in the cradle of my lower back. Had it all been a dream? A sudden rustle among the undergrowth shattered my fragile peace. I turned sharply, bracing for the inevitable return of that relentless darkness. Instead, I found myself staring into the vacant eyes of a boy no older than 8, his pale face marred by dirt and streaked with traces of tears. He stood unnaturally still, hair matted and limbs rigid, a caricature of innocence masked by something sinister. Help me, he rasped, voice impossibly teen an echo of the chorus I had heard earlier. Though his lips moved, a hollow sound spilled forth instead of genuine emotion, a puppet reciting a dreadful script that I hesitated, torn between the visceral dread that formed a weight in my stomach and the instinctual urge to save someone trapped like I had been. What do you want? I whispered, fighting to keep my voice steady. He took a step closer, and I noted how his shadow stretched grotesquely at his feet, distorting into the shapes of skeletal hands reaching toward me. You have to take me away from here. We can't stay. He shivered. Please, where do you want to go? I asked, my own fear weaving into my tone, a realization dawning that I might be lured into a trap yet again. He glanced behind him, eyes wide with terror, as if he sensed the unseen horrors prowling the edges of the moonlit clearing. The darkness, it wants me. It wants all of us. He took another step closer, lips trembling, revealing a set of jagged teeth that appeared far too sharp for any child. You're special, like us. They want you too. The fabric between worlds tore slightly, and I felt a frigid gust that slipped through the clearing like a specter, urging me to step back. I could hear the murmur of the trees, a pulse of anger that sent tendrils of shadow creeping closer. The boy's gaze darkened, the innocence evaporating like morning mist, revealing the deeper truth beneath. He was not what he seemed. What did you promise? I didn't want to know, yet the question slipped from my mouth unbidden. He smiled, not an innocent grin but a rictus that stretched beyond the limits of human capacity, shadows pooling in the jagged recesses of his mouth, painting it with darkness. To keep playing, of course. Before I could grasp the meaning of his words fully, the laughter erupted around us, resonating from the depths of the forest, each gleeful note twisting the tendrils of dread into unyielding knots. The boy turned, his face transforming, flickering like a candle in a tempest, caught between human and inhuman. Run! He shrieked suddenly, voice breaking into a cacophony of despair, and the shadowed forest reacted, the gnarled branches creaking like hushed whispers of malice. I didn't hesitate. Every muscle in my body screamed as I turned, sprinting through the clearing, foliage slashing against my skin and tangling at my feet. But the laughter grew louder, a twisted symphony that urged me to stay, to join, and I could feel their annual dark embrace closing in behind me, pressing like the geysers of a sinister dream. As I tore through the woods, the ground shifted beneath me, swallowing the earth with twisted desperation. I caught a glimpse of the boy, now standing still again, eyes turning vacant, watching me like he had never been a part of this at all, only a puppet, a void waiting to be filled by the darkness. Suddenly, my foot caught on a root, and I fell crashing to the ground. The whispers intensified around me, dragging down deeper into the silken tendrils of night waiting to seize me. As cold tendrils coiled around my ankle, I struggled against them, but it felt as if the sound of laughter surged forth, resonating through the trees like the tolling of bells. Join us. The voices pleaded in unison, some carried through a chorus of ghoulish echoes and monstrous laughter. The shadows danced eagerly, curling and writhing, feeding off my terror as tendrils pulled tighter. In my panic, I scanned the ground for anything to grasp onto. My fingers closed around something solid and cold, a weathered trunk of what had once been a toy chest, its peculiarly intricate carving smothered in a thick layer of damp earth. Desperation fueled a wave of strength as I yanked, pulling it free from the ground, but as I rolled over, the world shifted once more. The moonlight dimmed abruptly, plunging the clearing into utter darkness, save for the shimmering outline of the boy who now stood much taller, a gnarled grin stretched across his face, dark, smudged and ravenous. "Welcome back," he whispered, the shadows of the forest sharpening themselves into daggers as they moved closer, unseen horrors morphing into a nightmare that dragged me into the depths of the unknown. There would be no escape now. They had already claimed me, waiting with eternal smiles as the moonlight flickered once more and my screams echoed into the darkness. The shadows swallowed the last fading light, and as I succumbed, I realized with horror the game had just begun. The chilling void unfurled around me, a suffocating silence reeling me in like a predator luring prey. I lay, tangled in an unseen web of despair, the whispering shadows coiling around my thoughts, sealing away any flicker of hope. It felt as if I was both alive and a ghost within this cursed glade, a surreal limbo where the past and present fused together in malevolent harmony. The boy no longer the pure specter of childhood but something more malevolent tilted his head, the moonlight casting eerie patterns across his skin. "You'll play with us, won't you?" he taunted, his voice a cold breeze that cut through the surrounding darkness. "The game is so much more fun with new players." My heart thundered in my chest as I lay helpless beneath the onslaught of creeping shadows. "What game? What are you?" I gasped, desperation clawing at my throat. The twisted branches of the trees encircled me like a confining noose, their bark groaning, hungry for the warmth of the living. A chorus of whispers echoed back from the trees, laughter weaving in and out as if the woods themselves were alive. "He's too scared," one fragment said in feigned childishness, while another voice hissed, "Join us, and we'll give you a part to play." "No!" I screamed, the sound tearing through the suffocating miasma around me. I fought against the tendrils, cold fingers of shadow gripping my legs, pulling me deeper into the earth. Panic flared within me like a firestorm, and I wrestled free just enough to topple backward, rolling away from the boy who was now advancing towards me, his eyes glistening with a lust for chaos. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I pulled myself to my feet and sprinted again, propelled by primal instincts that screamed for survival. The forest pulsed with life, heightening the dread swirling within my mind. Behind me, I could hear the whispers sharpening into words, a relentless chant building in tempo, rising above the laughter as it transformed into a sinister melody that echoed like a fever dream. The deeper I fled, the more disoriented I became. The landscape shifted, the trees seemed to pulsate, their silhouettes bending in rhythmic patterns, guiding me deeper into an inescapable labyrinth. Soon enough, against every primal instinct that screamed for me to stop, I outpaced the shadowy tendrils, weaving ahead with the shadows now trailing behind, waiting, patient. In the heart of the woods, I stumbled upon a clearing illuminated not by the moon, but by a strange, phosphorescent light emanating from an ancient well at the center. The air felt charged, crackling with unseen energy, as if the well itself held secrets long forgotten and horrors better left undisturbed. As I approached, the ground trembled beneath me, disquiet curling around my ankles like waiting hands. Daring to peer into the depths, I squinted against the eerie glow. The darkness seemed alive, swirling with a depth that pulled at my gaze. And then I saw them, faces, more children, their mouths wide with silent screams, framed in shadows that wept and twisted, yearning for freedom. "What have you done?" The boy's voice came from behind me, now thick with rage, a serpent hissing through the dim light. I whirled around, my heart somehow managing to plunge deeper into despair. "You led me here." I spat defiantly, though my voice quavered. "What are they?" What do you want from me? The boy took a step forward, and as he did, the shadows leapt and twisted, ushering forth a wave of darkness that brushed against my skin like icy breath. They lost their games, and now they're trapped like us. But you are special, dear friend. You have the chance to play to learn the true meaning of this game. The forest shuddered in resonance with his words, laughter swelling again around me like an insidious wave. It coiled around my throat, suffocating, as I felt the tendrils returning, wrapping around me with an intimacy that made bile rise within me. Behind the boy, the well glimmered brighter, shadows deepening, and like a penance, I could see movement pale figures rising from the darkness, drawn to the ethereal light. The sound of their desperate whimpers permeated the air, merging with the sinister laugh that grew closer, pulsing in orchestrated chaos. In that dreadful moment, pain stabbed through my temples, a repressed memory clawing its way back. I knew this well. It had been part of the story spoken in my family, a dark secret cloaking ancestry like a haunting shadow. Then realization struck as the shadows surged forward, dragging me toward the well, the laughter merging into screams, echoing against the pulsating walls of history. You're one of them. I breathed, horror settling into a cold truth that consumed me. No. A hand reached out, cold, skeletal, a small child whose eyes burned with ancient sorrow. Do not let them take you, do not play the game. But the boy smiled, lips curled in triumph as the shadows pressed closer, seals of fate binding tighter. Desperation shot through me as I whipped around to face the encroaching darkness. I had to fight, to break free, to unravel the truth before they consumed me completely. Just as my resolve solidified, I felt my foot slip into the well, the abyss beckoning with a dark promise and the boy's laughter haunting my every thought. The darkness surged around me, an inevitable tide sweeping the world into an abyss of despair. Join us. The chorus chimed, a lie wrapped in sweet seduction as the figures in the well reached out, mouths bleeding with unspoken truths. As I plummeted, my scream resonated through the woods, a final gasp swallowed by darkness and unending mirth echoing through a grave of shadows, leaving nothing but the boy's wicked grin behind, illuminated in cruel triumph as he murmured into the night, "Game on." The world fell away in an overwhelming sprawl of darkness, the childlike laughter twisted in the air like fire in the wind. My body struck the cool, wet sides of the well, the slick stone refusing to yield, spinning me into a dizzying frenzy. Every instinct urged me to claw my way out, but the hands of the specters reached for me with an agonizing desperation, pulling me deeper, their faces bereft of hope, mouths widening in silent screams that clawed at my sanity. Suddenly, as the darkness embraced me, I felt a tug, a pull from somewhere deep within the shadows. The faces morphed around me, flickering like dying flames, and for a moment, I felt their Longinga shared pain, an almost familiar sorrow that dripped from the edges of their spectral forms. Beneath the surface, a heartbeat pulsed, an echo of the game they had all played, the one that snared children like poisonous thorns amidst a field of daisies. "Help us." They whispered in unison, their voices melding into a mournful harmony that resonated within the cavern of my mind. "You must remember. Only then can you fight." A wave of vertigo rolled through me, and the sensation of the ground beneath shifted, transforming into memories of rich laughter and carefree days spent racing through sun-drenched fields. My family, faces melded together in indistinct blur, yet one stood out, an elderly man with kind eyes. My uncle. I fell deeper still, past the forgotten playscapes of my youth, past shadows of laughter echoing in an empty home. He had warned me, had mentioned cursed destinies encased in whispering shadows. "Stay away from the woods," he scolded gently but firmly. "Some games are meant to be forgotten." The images recoiled, splintering like glass against stone, and I was struck anew by the guttural reality that those sentiments now belonged to the past. The manic laughter surged again like a tempest, a chaotic waltz of joy and despair drawing me further into the abyss. The shadows came alive, tearing apart the fabric of time and reality, revealing fleeting glimpses of children lost forever, seeking respite from fears tangible yet unseen. They darted along the periphery of my vision, their eyes filled with unyielding sorrow. "Play with us," like he did, a girl with hair like spun gold sang sweetly, her voice a sinister chime that echoed in my brain. "Don't let the game pass you by, I grasped at the spectral figures, seeking to hold on, but they slipped through my fingers like smoke fading into the inky void that threatened to swallow me whole. Suddenly, the world swirled, and I was hurtled upward, crashing against the well's cold stone lip that felt like a cruel hand pushing me back. I gasped for breath, yanked back to the surface with a suddenness that made my heart race. Stumbling from the well, I was met with the eerie sight of the clearing, shadows dancing around me with renewed hunger, whispering secrets that made my skin crawl. "Did you like our trick?" The boy's voice sang, stepping forward from the shadows, a radiant smile splitting his face and casting a cascade of darkness around him. "You're back, but you owe us now. To play is to remember, and soon you will learn the rules. No. I want." I screamed, shaking my head, yet deep within, I knew the truth. I was already bound by this twisted fate. The outlines of the children in the shadows throbbed with life, twisting into grotesque figures, mouths contorting in desperate pleas to release them, twisting and intertwining with indistinct shapes that writhed against their binds. "Help!" they chanted, melding their voices into a monstrous chorus that diverted the laughter's cadence into anguished cries. "Enough," the boy hissed, and with a tilt of his head, the shadows erupted, the air thickening with a cloying weight of despair. I was suffocating again, as tendrils wrapped around my wrists and ankles like chains forged from nightmares. "Now, you must decide," he said, his voice a slow, deliberate slither. "Choose, you can join us in our game, or you will become another player entrapped in the hunted ghost bound to the woods like all who dared trespass." Before you. As fear froze my veins, the twisted remnants of my family flashed briefly across my mind. Me uncle, a resolute guardian pushing back against the darkness with whispered truths, his final words urging me to escape. But one thing remained: time was running out. The forest pressed closer as shadows crawled forth like spiders on silent legs. Desperation clawed through me, igniting a strength I thought I had lost. "I won't play your game," I roared, even as icy fingers seized my throat. With a sudden flick of his wrist, the boy unleashed a wave of darkness that swept through the clearing, and from behind him, the shadows swelled, tumbling, converging towards me like a descending storm, shapes conveying more than mere whispers, intertwining the cries of the lost with my very essence. Then the ground trembled beneath me, the well emitting a low, guttural growl that sent ripples through the air. I noticed cracks splintering through the earth, drawing a path to the well's maw. The figures began pulling away, their eyes wide, verdant with an unexplained terror. In that moment, the boy's expression shifted, losing its playfulness, morphing into a rage that left my skin prickling. "You can't leave. The game isn't over." A last flicker of light danced around me, and I opened my mouth to scream, when suddenly, a cracking boom echoed through the glade. The ground beneath me quaked, opening wider. I felt myself teetering on the edge, the shadows shifting frantically, curdling the air with their anguished cries as I began to fall, and the last thing I saw before slipping into the bottomless pit of darkness was the boy's grin, wide and knowing, as an echo reverberated across the glade. "This is just the beginning." I plunged into the void, the darkness consuming me like the icy grip of death. But with every fleeting heartbeat, I felt a desperate tug, as though that abyss was not just an end, but a gateway, a portal to a place far more sinister than the shadows from which I had fled. Splashing into an unseen pool of bitter chill, I gasped, gulping in the stale air, a taste of iron and decay lingering at the back of my throat. My head throbbed as I struggled to orient myself in the oppressive gloom, feeling the wetness of stone beneath me, slick and slicker still with something darker than mere water. Around me loomed jagged rocks, their edges chiseled into grotesque forms, shaped like mocking grins and snarling faces contorted in eternal torment. I pushed myself off the ground, a sudden dread washing over me as I became aware of the low whispers echoing in the darkness, coiling through the air like smoke. "We waited," a voice hissed, dripping with malice. "We waited for you." I staggered, pulse racing, the whispers rising in fervor, merging with phantom laughter that teased the edges of my consciousness. Shadows danced around me, darting in and out of focus, and I felt their fingers clawing at the threads of my sanity, each tug a reminder of the choices now spiraling out of control. "My uncle," I whispered, the desperation reverberating in the cavern. "Where are you?" Silence answered, thick and suffocating. The sinister figures pressed closer, their forms shimmering like shards of glass. I could almost discern children's faces, twisted in anguish, their mouths moving in sync with that ominous chant, "Remember, remember." Images flashed in my mind like lightning illuminating the storm, my uncle's warning, the tales of this cursed place, the games marked by blood, laughter soaked in sorrow. I clutched my head, fighting against the onslaught of horror, but the memories came flooding back unbidden. The clearing, the well, the boy wasn't any ordinary child. I could feel it now, a deeper truth nestled beneath the surface of his mockery. With every violent ping of my heart, I sensed that the very fabric of this place was stitched together by lost souls yearning to break free, their chains rattling with sexual pleasure, wrath, and a dissection of courage. "Join us," they urged, their voices melding into that sickening harmony of despair. "Make a choice. It's what we must do." Summoning what remained of my strength, I pressed onward, searching for a way out, the shadows ready to engulf me at every turn. Dread gnawed at my gut. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played like a pawn in a game whose rules I hadn't yet grasped. The cavern swayed, the ground shifting with each tremor, pulling me toward tendrils of darkness slithering like serpents. It felt as if the walls themselves were alive, pulsating with longing and resentment, a hungry maw begging for fresh victims. A sudden flicker of light emerged at the far end, a glimmer that promised hope, and I instinctively scuttled toward it, driven by instinct and fear. But with each step closer, the whispers grew louder, transforming into a cacophony from the darkest recesses of my mind. "You can't escape," they taunted, pleading as though I were the answer to their unfathomable despair. Just as I reached the vibrant glow, a shockwave rattled the ground, sending me crashing against the stone. I clawed at the earth, desperately pushing myself up, but my fingers sank into darkness, wrapping around a moist, pallid hand that clawed back a desperate grip that felt both familiar and wrong. Lurching back, I turned, heart racing as the shadows converged again, forming a serpentine shape, eyes gleaming with a hollow hunger. They writhed before me, taking the semblance of my uncle, features twisted into a snarl, eyes black as midnight. "Why did you come? You should have stayed away," he wailed, his voice both haunting and heart-wrenching. No. I cried, recoiling in horror, as the realization hit. "You're not him." As the vision of my uncle began to dissolve into the darkness, the boy's echoing laughter rang out, seeping into my consciousness like an unwanted parasite. "Now you see," he taunted, voices merging. "Every game comes with a sacrifice. Choose wisely, or you will lose everything." Panic surged as I felt the shadows grow closer, clawing at me, their whispers intertwining into a sonorous chant, "Join us, join us, join us." The light flickered again, and I saw its way out. A crack leading to the world above, dangerously close but just out of reach. Yet as I backed toward it, it swallowed me in a blinding hue with the sudden anticipation of hope. A crack accompanied by a loud cawing echoed through the cavern, and then, the light pulsed until it extinguished, plunging me into suffocating darkness, alongside the deafening silence that rang with finality. A surge of claustrophobic panic enveloped me, the loss leaching from my heart as I whipped around, frozen by sharp dread. Something brushed against my shoulder, and I felt a breath against my ear, silken yet chilling. "Would you like to play a game?" it whispered, and the shadows erupted into a tumultuous surge, leaving me teetering as the chasm yawned wider beneath my feet. Suddenly, a figure lunged out from the darkness, and the last thought I had before everything swirling into a maelstrom of chaos and fear was, it was time to make my choice. The echoes of my uncle's question reverberated in my mind, his voice intertwining with the chilling whispers around me. Instinctively, I felt my heart quicken, a beat of fear punctuated by the shadows who now loomed over me, their presence thicker than the stony ground beneath my feet. I swayed, fighting the overwhelming urge to flee back into the darkness that had birthed me into this nightmare. "Play a game," I repeated, dread lacing my voice. The thought alone stirred something primal within, an unease that crawled beneath my skin. "What kind of game?" But the entity merely giggled, its voice a cacophony of my uncle's laughter intertwined with the chilling tones of the children who had wheeled around me, lost to the void. Shadows coalesced, forming shapes that danced just outside my periphery, teasing at my vision. I felt their breath on my skin, roiling with the collective malice of souls trapped in torment. A moment of clarity surged through the haze of fear, and I remembered the tales my uncle had told. The games serve not just to entertain, but to bind, to seal the lost souls into eternal servitude with each choice made in desperation. Each casualty had earned a token, a reflection of their darker selves. You have to understand, the whisper continued, now dripping with anticipation. Sacrifice must be made in the name of freedom. Choose wisely, and perhaps this place will reveal its true nature. Through the mass of shadows, a light flickered again, pulsing erratically, illuminating a grim scene before me. I could barely make out several objects strewn upon the floor, nightmarish tokens of previous players, a rusted knife, a worn teddy bear with a single button eye, and a ragged diary covered in stains that hinted at a tale drenched in sorrow. Each held an energy, a weight far beyond their crude forms, and I could sense the malevolence thrumming from them, whispering the names of past players. Pick one, it urged. Every choice weighs heavily in this realm. It might be your only chance to escape. That I stepped closer, drawn to the diary more than the others, its worn spine exuding a familiarity, a whisper of hope and despair entrapped within its pages. I was reaching for it when a shriek pierced my thoughts, sharp and piercing, formless and infinite, rattling my bones with ice. From the shadows surged a figure, clawing its way forth. It was a child, its face a mask of torment, eyes sunken and hollow, just like the ghosts that played out within this infernal chamber. Don't trust it. Don't play their games. The child wept, reaching out for me, and in the blink of an eye, a series of sinewy hands appeared, dragging the figure back into the dark. I stumbled back, a primal root of fear anchoring me to the rocky ground, locking my gaze onto the fading silhouette. Wait! I shouted, but it only echoed through the cacophony of whispers. The shadows shimmered ominously, and the raspy laughter that filled the cavern sounded both enraged and delighted. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The shadows pooled at my feet, swirling, consuming the very air I breathed. With a surge of panic, I realized the shapes were no longer passive, they slithered, crawling toward me with rancid intent. I needed to make a decision, and fast. My hands trembled violently, hesitating between the knife, the bear, and the diary. That as I clenched my fists, the voice again pierced the tension. Choose a token, and it'll show you the pathway that opens to the innocent soul. Refuse, and you shall remain one of us. Caught in a heady frenzy, I realized what their twisted concept of innocence meant. It meant taking a soul, any soul, me soul heavily riddled not just with doubt but steeped in anguish and despair. I glanced at the remnants of lost children who still wandered these cursed halls, condemned to play until choice turned to bitterness. The voices crescendoed into a shriek, thrumming through my skull as the shadows danced violently around me, their spectral forms writhing with anger and desperation. The very ground began to tremble under the weight of their malice, the air thickening as I felt myself being sucked into the gaping maw that grinned malevolently behind meth chasm yawning wider, demanding sacrifice. Choose. They roared, the shadows contorting, swirling violently around my shivering form. Choose, or be consumed. With the weight of terror pressing down upon my heart, I blasted through every fiber within me in a desperate bid to fend off the consuming darkness. Just as I lifted my trembling hand, heart racing, I felt an intense pull from the shadows behind me, a sharp, biting cold searing through my senses as the abyss beckoned for payment. That I in that moment, the last shard of my sanity fraying at the edges, I screamed a single word, echoing through the cavern like a verdict, a choice spilled from my lips like blood. And then everything went black. When I awoke this time, the air was still. An unsettling silence enveloped me, thick and palpable. I sat up, shaking off the inertia that clung to my limbs like cobwebs. My heart pounded in my chest, reverberating against the walls of an unfamiliar space. Dim light flickered above, revealing a round room lined with jagged stone, completely devoid of shadow but seeping with darkness. It felt as if I were trapped inside a massive, hollowed-out egg. The last memory surged back me, desperate choice, the token I had grasped with a blood-soaked hope. Yet, I felt no lighter, no freer. A sense of dread coursed through me as I pulled myself to my feet, taking stock of my surroundings. The walls seemed to throb, a slow rhythmic pulse that echoed with a life of its own, but more chilling were the faces I now saw lining the stony grotesque gallery of screams, twisted and contorted in eternal agony. Choose. They had screamed, their voices still echoing in the recesses of my mind. But what had I chosen? My shaking fingers brushed against the frigid walls, tracing the outlines of the faces, feeling their pain seep into my very soul. Had I inadvertently sealed my fate, becoming an echo of the very essence I sought to escape? Are you ready to play, dear? A voice parried a familiar falsetto that curled around me like smoke. I turned sharply, heart leaping into my throat as I stared into the wickedly grinning visage of the boy, his features sharper, more defined amid the other doomed specters, shadows swirling indefinitely around him. You know a game awaits you, and your token is just the beginning. Where are we? I breathed, panic-laced urgency wrapped tightly around my thoughts. My mind raced, seeking an exit, while his smile widened, teeth gleaming as he stepped closer. This is a purgatory of our making, my dear. A place to keep the innocent and the guilty intertwined forever, he hissed. A swirling mass of shadows writhed behind him, each specter now popping into view, a parade of lost souls. Eyes glimmering with desperation, they reached out as if begging for freedom, but I could feel the truth wrapped inside their disheveled forms. They had ceased to be themselves long ago, merely puppets in this ghastly play. And what is my role? I asked, trying to mask the tremble in my voice. You have a choice to make. He crooned, tilting his head, eyes glimmering with delight. Will you play our game, and free yourself from these burdens? Or will you join us, lost, damned? Your soul is a fine one, and we could always use another player. The very essence of his words coiled around me, dread pulling tight like a noose. Would my tokeny choice ultimately condemn me to this fetid realm? The laughter of children echoed in the distance, a memory so twisted it felt almost painful. Their voices whispered like a siren's call, tainting the air with false innocence. Could I trust any of this? What do I need to do? His grin widened, transforming into a rictus. Ah, but therein lies the rub. The game unfolds in entwined tapestry stories of sacrifice, of choices and consequences. So much is weighed in the balance. The hunt shall commence, and you must choose your target. A chill traveled through my body, a horror that momentarily knocked the breath from my lungs. Target? Yes, the shadows that linger. Those trapped with you in the dance of despair. Choose one to take their fate, and gain your freedom. His laughter rang out again, a cacophony of glee that cut through my thoughts like a blade. And just like that, the shadows surged forward, the faces morphing into frantic expressions, voices rising, pleas for mercy wrapping around me in a frantic chorus of despair. Memories flashed before my eyes, the children trapped within, wailing in silent screams, memories of what they once were, clawing upward, entwining with flashes of their laughter, their innocence morphing, twisting them into grotesque distortions of their former selves. Why them? Why must their torment be the price of my escape? My heart pounded heavier, and oh, the weight of the inevitable choice bore down with each breath. This was the true game, to enact despair on the innocent, on those who had suffered like I had, caught within these haunted woods for far longer than me. No. I refuse. I turned away, wilting beneath the oppressive intensity of their anguish, my pulse hammering in my ears. But the boy's laughter rippled through the air, punctured by the ugly twist of shadows clawing at my being. Do you really think you can escape this? You are already bound, dear friend. Choose one, or face the darkness that seeks to consume you. In that agonizing moment, reality warped, like sheets of paper transposed under a relentless weight. Time itself seemed to slow, the shadows pressing closer, choking the light, forcing me to confront a truth I desperately wanted to deny. The burden of their trapped urges dragged me further down, lost dreams and abandoned laughter taunting me, painting the walls with agony. Choose. The shadows trembled, join the game or join us. Resolute and trembling, I turned back to the boy, fully aware of the peril lacing through every fiber of my being. My breath hitched, and for a fleeting moment I considered it had dark threshold, the ones that still held a glimmer of life. I swallowed hard, a realization crystallizing in my mind. I wouldn't let them push me into a game where my humanity would be the sacrifice. I wouldn't allow them to break me, no matter how thick the tendrils of darkness wrapped around me. Closing my eyes, I reached for the memory of hope, of the essence that flooded through me in life. I didn't want to be part of their wicked play. I wanted freedom for all of you, and suddenly, a strength surged in me, a determination born of truth. I choose all of you, I yelled, defiance ringing clear like a bell. The shadows recoiled, and for the briefest moment, the boy's expression twisted to something dark and feral. No. You dare. You cannot choose them. The air crackled around me, ground trembled beneath my feet as an ancient magic rippled through the darkness. Yes. I do. I choose their spirits to be freed from torment. I will not play your game. The shadows writhed in shock, their whispers of despair folding into despair turned to agony. In that moment, a pulse of light unfurled, breaking like the first rays of dawn. Together, the faces of the damned shifted to joy, relief cutting through their expressions, and I felt them seep through me. Run. Be free. I screamed, over the crescendoing chaos as energy coiled, reshaping the cavern, shaking shadows with every fragment of light. Suddenly, I was surrounded in a brilliant flash. They reached out to me, cells of past embraced by newfound warmth. Whatever was binding them was severed with every ounce of courage I had left. And then in that flash, I was flying upward, cascading out of the abyss of darkness, only to crash back into the fray, enveloped in the light of dawn creeping through the trees, air freshening with the morning dew. I lay heavy upon the earth, raw and exhausted, memories of the woods singing through every beat of my heart. The cabin cast a long shadow behind me, a thing of darkness, a remnant of the game still lingering like a whisper, but I knew this truth now, the darkness would always lurk around, beautiful and haunting, and I alone held the choice. That as I stumbled back through the woods, I chanced to look back at the cabin, my blood freezing in my veins, for even as I retreated, I heard that boy's voice reverberate through the trees, shrill and mirthful. You've escaped this time, dear auntie, but don't think you've won. The game never ends. And somewhere deep within the shadows, I felt the suffocating embrace of the unending game as I was now its guardian, whispering dark truths to those who dared to enter. The darkness had claimed me, and in the depths of my soul was still playing.